Hi, everyone. This is Matt Kinsman, Head of Content at SIIA's Connectiv division. Thanks again for joining us today for Building a Data Product. Are you ready? Monetizing data is on everybody's mind. It was the core theme of last year's Connectiv Executive Summit, and it will be again at the summit this May, with speakers such as Christian Ward, who's the Chief Data Officer of Source Media, talking about how to make your organization data smart, as well as Forrester analyst Stephen Casey, who's going to offer an exclusive look at research that compares different data marketing platforms from Bombora to ZoomInfo. But turning that opportunity into reality can really be a challenge, especially if you're the one who's been tasked with figuring this out. Today we're happy to have Prescott Shibles, Senior Vice President of Audience Data at Randall Reilly, share his expertise on how to go about building a data product and what you need to consider. Randall Reilly was always one of the pioneers on turning market data into a paid product in B2B, and that business has really grown exponentially under Prescott. You guys have got one of the leading authorities on really building a data product within B2B at your disposal today, so please take an opportunity to make this a dialogue as much as possible. Ask questions via the Q&A tab or unmute your line and ask questions to Prescott directly. Prescott, with that, please take it away.
Hi, everyone, and hello from Charlotte, North Carolina. Like Matt said, please feel free to pop a question in the Q&A at any time. The hard thing about webinars is you can't read the room, so the more feedback you give me, the more I know where to linger and where to keep going. So if you're here, you're likely here because either your boss said, hey, this would be a good idea for you to show up, or you're like me. You want to be on top of the disruptive challenges in the marketplace, the things that are going to create competitive advantages in the marketplace. In my time, in my career in B2B and digital, I've always tried to focus on what's the next new thing that's disrupting the market. So a little bit about me, I started off at About.com in '99. Learned my way through SEO and ad networks and paid search at that time. We got acquired, and that's how I got into the B2B side of things. But at each step of the way, I was constantly looking for what was the next thing. For me, in the last couple of years before I joined Randall Reilly, I started to think more and more that there was this convergence of marketing and sales tech along the lines of digital and data coming together. I saw that when I was at eMedia Vitals, at Penton, at Advantage Media, and when I was on the board of Source Media. So I'm really excited because the last chapter of my career has been spent really big into data, still with a very sophisticated digital team operating in the Tuscaloosa office here at Randall Reilly. But I've spent a lot of time focused on how do we use machine learning, predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics to help our clients come up with better marketing and sales strategies. A little bit on Randall Reilly and on the data side itself. One of the things that if your boss told you to show up, hopefully the things that will get you interested is that the data products division is 42% of Randall Reilly's profit, while employing just about 15% of its workforce. So the margins on this business are good. It's recurring revenue, and it's subscription based. So you have a little more visibility when the economy slows down. Randall Reilly itself, we consider ourselves a data and data-driven digital marketing services company. We have data products like EDA, which operates in the agriculture, construction, logging, machine tools, lift truck space, and a couple of other industrial markets. We have media brands like Equipment World, Total Landscapes Care, Aggregates Manager, Commercial Carrier Journal, and Overdrive. And then we are actually we do a tremendous amount of marketing services leveraging platforms like Google and Facebook, and work very closely with them. Moving into the data side of things, this is the duh statement everywhere, right? 91% of marketers say they segment data better to target and engage B2B audiences. I don't know why that wouldn't be 100, but at 91%, you're asking, okay, so what are their needs? Well, they're using data, but is that data any good? And the Demand Gen report that came out last year really showcased that there's a tremendous amount of pain in the data space. So here are the problems that your clients or prospects are likely experiencing. Data is old or out of date. There are two kinds of data, I like to say. There's data that ages like wine and data that ages like fish. Contact data ages like fish. I mean, there's a reason why we go and re-verify everybody's information every year on our circulation, right? So our clients are experiencing that pain. Their CRM data is old and out of date. They don't have time or resources to implement an effective process. In other words, I don't have a developer or a person or a marketer sitting on top of that stuff until I'm ready to use it. It's more project oriented. I got to clean this data up because I want to do a campaign. What was most surprising to me is that I saw in this study the 64% of them say they do not have enough data on current customers. I was absolutely aware of that trend with our customer base. They usually started off saying, hey, we know our markets really well, but when you push them a little bit, they don't know it very deeply. I was surprised at the prevalence of it. So, and then you've got the traditional issues of I've got tons of different sources of data all in their own software systems, in their own silos. I can't bring that together to give me one solid view of it, and the platforms that I'm using aren't very good. Those challenges, even when someone manages to pull it off and pull it together, what's interesting to me is that the more companies use data, the more they realize they need help. So this study, I'm going to summarize the bar chart without getting into the details, but the fact that you see trend data there, what you see is people in 2016 were more confident in their current marketing technologies ability to support the optimal use of audience data than they were in 2017. That means the more that they use marketing tech to leverage their audience data, the more they realize how many problems they really have. So that's a great opportunity for us in the B2B world, because the more someone starts to work with you, the more they realize they have other pain points for you to help them with. It's definitely a path towards a deepening client relationship. So how big is the data market? And there's a whole bunch of different ways that you put it. B2B advertising, depending on what source you're using, could be somewhere between 4.6 billion or 6 billion, depending on which source you're using. How does data stack up to that? You've got integration, processing, and hygiene, which is about 4.3. Hosting and management, 4.2. Analytics, modeling, and segmentation, 1.6. Omnichannel, which means combining direct mail with email and digital, that's 3.5. Transactional, which is sending of communications tied to some kind of transaction. So I buy something, you send me a satisfaction survey. Digital, which is the onboarding of audience data, like using LiveRamp or even BPA's new solution to enable your audience to be targeted on other websites, 2 billion. And then you've got some other niche markets there. So that's kind of, the left side's more like on the kind of marketing database and marketing side of things. On the sales side, supporting CRM, you can see that the CRM market has just exploded, going from 14 billion to 36 billion in 7 years. So the market's quite large, and there's a lot of opportunities to play there. When you're thinking about trying to get into the data side of the business or provide a data solution to your client base, you clearly want to start with what are the pain points you're trying to solve. For us, we typically talk and try to blueprint on how complete a picture do they have of their prospects. Our RigDig product has about 250 different fields of data on 1.1 million trucking entities here in the U.S. So it is really, really rich with information. On the EDA side, we have, in many cases, 60 to 80% of the market with transaction-specific history, meaning purchasing or financing history. So the amount of analysis that we can help them with is significant there. You'll want to think about what information would your prospects or your marketplace want outside of what they already have. The second is not enough prospects. Good old-fashioned lead gen. 3 is not knowing how my market has changed. In ag and construction and even in trucking, we're seeing some consolidation in the market. So helping people keep abreast of what's really happening and what's going on there is pretty significant. And the fourth is missing out on sales. So one of the most overlooked, in my opinion, opportunities from a data perspective is knowing who's not in market and what marketing and sales may have missed. So for us, we have some proprietary data that we're able to leverage to actually say, hey, we saw some financing activity at this account. But many B2B publishers do ask, what products are you planning on buying in the next 12 months? Very few ask, what have you recently bought in the last 12? Providing that information back to those people will, one, signify that there was someone in market that the marketing and sales organization did not know about and was not in on. 2, it also lets them know that they're likely not to be in market for a while again. If anyone's heard of lean canvases, this is kind of like a one-page business plan. If you're thinking about trying to put something together, it's a great way of putting your ideas on one sheet of paper and fleshing it out so that you can kind of see all of the different aspects of what would normally go into a business plan. What are your problem statements? List like 3 problems. What are the current alternatives to your solution? What is your solution? How are you going to measure key metrics? The unique value proposition, which also gets to barrier to entry. Your unfair advantage, of course. All of these things really get you to think about what data you should be collecting and what things are hard for someone else to collect. The most important thing I think about or one of the reasons why I think most people are interested in getting into the data business is that there's a barrier to entry that is not there on a B2B media site or even a conference. These types of things have a stickiness to them and a barrier to entry that you should be taking advantage of. So again, first starting off with what data points are important to your client base or your marketplace. You want to be able to find things that are really unique and proprietary, or at least difficult to replicate. You don't want to be in a situation where you're in an arms race for features because you're using the same data as everyone else all the time. If you are, you need to find a way to create some kind of secret sauce around it that gives you an edge in the area. But you want to think about what things are important from a selling standpoint, profiling, from a marketing and segmentation standpoint. Circulation data is clearly a great start, but you're going to want to go beyond that. Try and find multiple sources of information to get more intelligence about the marketplace. How much of the universe do you have? It is much harder to charge premium rates for data if you don't have 50 to 60% of the universe. In our space, most of we sell to a lot of dealerships, so truck dealers, agriculture, construction. They've been in the market a very long time. In many cases, third generation of a family. They think they know their community and their marketplace really well. You've got to show them that you know it better, and that you know a lot of people that they actually don't know about. And then what kind of market intelligence do you have? You want to be able to help people think strategically about their market. So you have to be able to help them understand the segmentation, the segments of the market, and the relative value of those segments. So in this case, you're looking at a bar chart of the bars represent the number of organizations, and the line graph represents the number of units operated by those organizations. And RigDig is our trucking product. So here we're talking about trucks and fleets. And so you could see the relative size of each position. And if you're selling parts, as an example, you know that you're probably going to sell about $5,000 worth of parts to per truck per year. So this really helps you identify where the opportunities in the market are. Again, missed opportunities. In this case, EDA, one of the things that we do is we look for, we mine financial transactions. If you finance a piece of equipment and it doesn't have a title, like any kind of anything you see along the side of the road doing road building or heavy construction equipment, ag equipment, when you finance that, the lender files a UCC filing. We kind of take that information and organize it and classify it so that it's almost the equivalent of registration data. So we're able to see when someone bought a new piece of equipment in your area of responsibility and when it wasn't your brand. So we can immediately notify, as soon as we process the data, every day we kind of notify people of here are the transactions that we've seen from buyers in your area who bought a brand that wasn't yours. And that helps those salespeople and sales managers meet with their sales teams to say, hey, were we in on this transaction? Did we not have the equipment on hand? Did we have the deal priced wrong? Did we not? Were we not aggressive enough on the trade-in value? What actually led to us missing this deal? And it's actually one of the most compelling parts of our value proposition, because they have data on folks that they know, but they don't see what else is going on outside the market. Did that person just not buy a piece of equipment, or did they buy it from someone else? We give them that visibility. The final thing is making the data available in tools that salespeople want to use, things that actually help them. Our mobile apps have been a real game changer for us in that regard. The usage on the mobile app is multiple times greater than the usage on the web app. Why is that? As a salesperson, it's very easy for me to pull up, here are the prospects that are in my area. It gets into my workflow. If I'm making a sales call out 20 miles away, I might want to see after that sales call is done who else I might be able to get on the phone and swing by and say hello to. And right in the power of their hand, they're able to see all of the brands they own, the equipment by category, who typically finances it, and then all the dates of those transactions. Many of our clients have CRM systems that their sales teams refuse to use, but the sales teams will use our data and our applications because of how user-friendly they are and how helpful they are to closing business. You'll also, from a marketing standpoint, it's great to be able to get intelligence about a segment of the market, but then you want to be able to target it. So all of our, both of our RigDig and EDA are both actually integrated via an API to our customer data platforms. So in this case, I did a search for fleets in a 50-mile radius of Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I'm located. And I said, okay, I want to go ahead and be able to target these people digitally. So we have, you can do a lead list to do a direct mail piece, but now we can also go ahead and export them to our customer data platform. So this pushes to BlueConic, which is our CDP, and this is we'll tell you a little bit about how many have an email address, how many have a contact. We created an audience size of about it's not rendering here for some reason, but on about 9,800 of the 10,000 records made it here, and then came over here and created a Facebook audience as well. This one's a little bit out of date, so about a year old. So that would have been closer to probably around 5,000 or 6,000 if that were up to date. And then the next step, the most recent stuff that we've done is now trying to really automate this for the marketing and sales teams themselves. How can providing data is great for the data geeks, but for some folks, they want to be spoon-fed a little bit. Just tell me, who should I be chasing? Make this easy for me. So we've really started getting into predictive modeling in the past year. We started most of that work back in February of last year. We had our first predictive model really built and baked in Q2 of last year. And then we were looking for how do we integrate this or pull it into the user workflow. So our predictive model right now, our top 10% of predictions will bring in 38% of the buyers in a category and 61% of the purchases. So we're creating a lot of efficiency by being able to identify who's likely to buy. And what we've done is we've actually made that into a predictive analytics solution. You're able to take a beacon, put it on your website, and we will then surface only, we identify what companies are coming to your website, and then surface only the ones that are most likely to buy, and we send out an email. We made the product Dad Easy. What I mean by Dad Easy is my father still microwaves food in 2-minute increments. He hits time cook 200 start. So either things are underdone, overdone, or just right. But most of the time, things will explode. Other times, he has a pretty warm piece of food, but he only knows how to microwave any kind of food by using that combination of buttons. So we wanted to take the buzzwordiest thing that we had, predictive analytics, and make it Dad Easy. So we send out a daily email. So that email will say, here's the company, here's the EDA profile, here's the RigDig profile, and then here's the % likelihood that they are to buy, so our confidence factor. You can then click on that profile and see all the information that we have on that particular company and really get a good feeling for what their purchasing habits are, what their brand loyalties are, do they have a new or used preference, anything of that nature. And in this case, you're looking at somebody who's, if you've looked at 21 pieces of equipment and our algorithm had an 84% likely to buy on you, that person's probably going to buy pretty quickly. And by that I mean that company is probably going to buy. We're not the first to market here. You may have heard of Demandbase, and I think one of the biggest threats to the media side of our business are these account-based marketing account-based marketing offerings where you can go in, say, here is my CRM accounts, find companies that look like this. What roles do you typically target at that company? And then they'll go ahead and make some recommendations using AI as well. And they'll start to say, here's some of the things that we recommend, some of the customers or accounts that we think you should be targeting. Here's a couple of the other folks that you might want to check out. 6sense and EverString, I think, have been in the space the longest after Demandbase and Terminus. Very, very interesting set of offerings. LeadSpace, Inside Sales, and Ignite Technologies. Ignite just acquired acquired last year a company called Infern, which had done some really cool work in this space as well. But getting into the nuts and bolts of how to build your own. First, you want to start off with how to source data. A couple of key there's public data and proprietary data. So public, there's a couple of databases out there, Wikidata. A lot of people are scraping information from websites to find out certain pieces of information. A lot of pricing is done via web scraping these days. And then there's government data. Government captures a lot of data. You might want to check out data.gov to see what kind of information might be available. And if there isn't data posted for your industry, but there is a form somewhere on the web that's collecting information for the government about companies in your industry, you can use a Freedom of Information Act request to get at some of that information. You might ask them how it's stored before. You might make the Freedom of Information Act to ask how many companies and how it's stored before you actually make the request, because you'll want to figure out how to get it in a format that you can use. Then there's proprietary data. You've got your circulation data. You've got your website behavior. I mean, Bombora has made a business off of taking B2B publisher behavioral data and selling it. So there's value in that intent data. We use Dun & Bradstreet a tremendous amount. The other thing, the advantage of using Dun & Bradstreet is you don't have to ask things like what industry are you in, how much revenue do you have, what employees you have, but they also give you a lot of really great tools to help you figure out these are 3 locations at this parent company. And those things are really, really important when you want to start getting into account-based marketing. Being able to kind of differentiate between locations of a company and the parent company itself. D&B's just been a tremendous partner for us. And then there's a company called Clearbit, which offers a tremendous amount of data as well. You can feed it a bunch of domains and get about, I think about 60 fields of data back. Their LinkedIn profile, if they've raised money, what their revenues are, what their employees are, their LinkedIn profile, their Twitter profile, their logo, etc. So that's a real good source too. Then you want to organize the data. It sounds simple, but householding is really quite the pain in the tuchus. You want to take all of, I'm Prescott Shibles. I'm at Randall Reilly in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I'm also listed on the Randall Reilly website, and therefore you might have a record in your database of me as Prescott Shibles. I was previously the Vice President of Audience, and the audience team was located in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So you might have those 2 records for me, and you're going to want to be able to stitch those 2 locations together and to be able to have rules as to if I'm showing an address for you in a branch and also at a headquarters, I might want to take the branch as your primary address. The firmographics. The great thing, once you have a master list of companies and locations, you can then start to attribute characteristics at the company level. So I'm going to use a trucking example. Here are people that have Cummins engines in their trucks. So, or here are the companies that have trucks with a Cummins engine in them. If I now want to target mechanics who work on Cummins engines, I can just go over to my contacts, pick out the mechanic's job title, and then come over to the firmographics and say, okay, give me mechanics who work at companies that run Cummins engines. that company data can be associated with every single contact that you get, including contacts that you buy. So if you're doing circulation work, you can start to do your own segmentation on that data with firmographic data that you already know about. That's also really helpful for lead gen. You could say, hey, I'm going to pre-qualify some companies for this particular product suite because I know they do X, Y, or Z. So often I get like, how the heck, all right, I got the data together, how the heck do I start? And I stole this, I put the source up there for Juice Analytics, but it's typically you start off kind of like as an Excel jockey. You get this data together and every customer kind of asks you different questions, so you just kind of drop it in a pivot table and you're kind of manipulating the data to see what it tells you or what you can find out with it. And you get a couple of people to buy said data set, and that ends up kind of being your proof of concept to help get into the application development stage. And then you want to start doing, okay, now I need real requirements. I need to think a little bit more about how people are going to use the product. So creating user stories, not just functionality, but write your personas of your users, how they're going to want to use the product, what are their pain points, what are their needs. Then you're going to want to think a little bit about how am I going to charge for this. I don't want to give everybody access to all of the information, so I'm going to need to build in some type of permissioning so that somebody can buy this slice of data, so that account management and application stuff needs to be built out. And then after you get out of the, kind of the application world and you start getting clients on board, you need to start really productizing it. And that means investing in client success or customer experience. The key thing to having a really successful data business is retaining customers. One of the hardest things about the media side of our business is somebody starts a campaign for a product launch. After that product's been launched for a little bit, that money goes away, and you're left kind of now trying to find the next thing to chase from a money standpoint. Like, with a data business, if you get ingrained in their workflow and they rely on your data, they're going to subscribe to it, and they're going to keep subscribing to it, so long as you keep providing value. So this is kind of the evolution of how your business might grow. You might start off with a data geek with Excel or Power BI, and you might bring in a database and application developer, and eventually you might be bringing a lot more data sets together, and you'll take an ETL developer in or to free up your DBA to do more work to help you take on more customers. But on the client side, you're going to want to start doing some things along those lines as well. Many people start off with this approach of, okay, I'm going to sell you a subscription, and then I'm going to call you 2 months ahead of your subscription's end date to kind of work on your renewal. If they're not using the product at the time that you call them, even though they've been through training and everything else, they're probably not going to renew. Or you're going to be in a situation where they're hitting you over the head saying, I'm not seeing value, I want a price discount. So having a client success team that not only trains them and onboards them up front, but does regular check-ins and is monitoring usage and engages with that client to ensure that they continue to use the product and get value out of the product throughout their subscription is a critical component of success. I think our annualized retention has gone up about 7 points in the last 3 years, and that's had seven-figure impact, multi-seven-figure impact. So retention is just, I can't stress it enough, like a really critical component of how you want to set up for success. What are your revenue models? the way to climb on the valuation game and create the most enterprise value is clearly subscriptions. That said, there are some customers who are not going to want a subscription. They're going to want a one-time pull. Maybe they want to do a direct mail, something along those lines. So you want to have kind of options for both. After you get down to how am I charging on an ongoing basis or an ad hoc basis, then you want to look at how do you price it. For subscriptions, is it based on the amount of data they subscribe to or the amount of users that are using the system? Recognizing, of course, that any time you tie price to users or data, there's an incentive to buy less of that. On the user side, they're going to want to share accounts more. On the data side, they're going to probably ask you to slice the data very, very specifically. So having the ability to slice your data in granular fashion will help you greatly if you choose to go down that path. And then you can also get to usage-based models, especially if you've got an API. The more times you hit the API, the more money you make. Or the more times the client hits the API, the more money you make. And then finally, a lot of pricing models are based on the number of records that you have access to. One of the key things that we learned over time, before I got here, a pricing change was made to go from the number of prospects in your data set to being more tied to the number of units that they owned. So someone who, a fleet that has 100 trucks is worth more as a prospect than a fleet that owns 5. So we really aligned our pricing models to be more affiliated with the amount of equipment they owned and the value of the purchasing activity that went on within that AOR. Some of the vendors that we use, all of our data is up in the cloud on Amazon Redshift. So AWS is, Amazon Web Services is a definite core element of our tech stack. I mentioned Dun & Bradstreet before. Blue Conic is our CDP. That's what allows us to onboard those targeted audience data sets. Silicus is our offshore development team. We're a hybrid of both onshore and offshore. We use Google Maps for a lot of the radius searches and map plotting. Melissa Data helps us standardize and normalize our address data, and helps when you standardize your addresses, it makes it easier to match and dedupe companies. And clearly we use partnership with Infogroup to get at some of their hygiene as well. NCOA, CAS, some append work there, and then Looker and Domo for our visualizations. And we've recently moved off of Looker. As you go through it, here's some other folks that you might be interested in looking at as well. When you're talking about integrating multiple data sets, there's a whole bunch of vendors out in this space. I just thought I'd name a couple. But one of the major trends that's happening right now is integration of your data or the data offering that you have into other applications like marketing automation, like customer data platforms, like CRM. So you're going to want to have some ability to kind of pull some stuff together. Likewise, you're going to want to integrate multiple data sources. So you're going to have to find a way to match them to one another, dedupe them, and get to a golden source of record. So the ones up top here are integrating with other platforms. The ones towards the bottom are more about integrating sources and bringing data together. So with that, I think I actually managed to end on time for once. But one of the things I do want to just say is I really value the Connectiv experience. I believe that peer learning is really important. So I encourage you to reach out to me and ask some questions right now. I find a lot of value in talking to my peers and hearing how other people think through problems, and I hope that I've given you guys a couple of nuggets to take away back to your companies as well.
Prescott, thanks very much. Excellent presentation. Folks, at this point, we are opening it up for questions. You can pose a question two ways. You can submit it via the Q&A tab in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Just type that question in and send it to the co-presenters. Or you can unmute your line, hit *7. That will open up and you can ask your question right over the line. Prescott, we do have a question that came in. It says, the apps you showed in the stories are quite compelling. Can you share the high-level business/revenue model?
Sure. So we are primarily a subscription product. Our value prop on the I'll give you the EDA use case because we've been in that business 30 years and it's evolved over time. But the revenue model there is we will sell you 5 years of historical data, and typically we default to a 2-year subscription length. So you're getting 7 years of data, and we price it based on the amount of data that we have in the 5-year history, as well as what we anticipate coming in. So we're able to trend line kind of here's how many leads you're going to get a month over that period of time. Here's how much value it is. We basically take each industry has a value assigned to a unit of equipment, and we take the unit value, the average unit value for the month, multiply it by that amount, and that is your subscription price. And then we also layer on top of that mobile app licenses or additional web licenses. So you get up to, depending on the package you buy, X amount of licenses for your enterprise to use. You can then buy more after that. Toby, did I answer that? Can you say yes, that was a good answer, or no? Okay, sweet.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Folks, don't forget you can ask your question over the phone. Just hit *7. That will unmute your line. You can also pose your question in the Q&A tab, just like Toby did. Prescott, I've got kind of a nuts and bolts question for you. You guys obviously have a very sophisticated model. You have several listeners on the call today who've got fairly sophisticated data product models as well. For those people who are just starting out, who boss came down the hall and said, hey, I want a data product, let's figure this out. How do they assess their opportunity? Is there a minimum in terms of resources that they have? What do they need to look at just in terms of the potential for actually creating a data product?
So if you're getting started, I'd advise pulling the data together and pulling in an outside shop, and especially consider some offshore resources. They will enable you to extend your capabilities into some of the more data geeky or data science-y realms without having to hire that talent, and that talent is ridiculously hard to come by right now. Everybody wants data jockeys. So there's a variety of folks that are out there. I'm sure that Connectiv could probably connect you with some associate members who specialize in those things. But my advice would be if you haven't built a data product before, leverage someone who has, because some of that work is likely to be capitalizable because you're building a new platform. So having that doesn't have to hit your operating budget, and if you have that flexibility to be able to spend some money on something without it completely whacking your P&L for the year, having someone who's going to be able to help you do it the right way and has the expertise in the different roles that would be required. I mean, at the end of the day, you need, for a data product to work well, if you're building a full-fledged application, you're going to need front-end resources who are either going to be good at embedding a BI suite or doing JavaScript-based libraries to create the graphs and charts for the visuals, you're going to need a DBA, and you're going to need some kind of ETL work, and then you're going to need an application developer. It's easier to kind of get that as a outside than it is to kind of start from scratch and beg, borrow, and steal those resources. But if you have a large development team and you have the capacity, you certainly can do some of that work and dump it into Excel as a proof of concept. Those would be my two paths. Is that helpful?
Sounds perfect. Prescott, you gave some great examples of companies you can partner with, how publishers can work with some of these data providers to really extend their services. In the past, particularly with marketing data providers, those relationships haven't always been beneficial to the publisher. Can you talk a little bit about how you assess a potential partner? What do you need to look out for?
Are they selling to my client base? So our relationship with D&B is just ideal because D&B targets the larger companies, and we target more niche companies. I get freaked out by some of the ones like Bombora and others because they're selling data to the same people that I'm selling to. That doesn't mean that their data and our proprietary data wouldn't be a good fit or even a good idea. It just means that I have some anxiety about it. So I'm not bagging on them at all, but I do feel like when they're chasing the same dollars that you're chasing, it gets complicated.
All right, great. Prescott, we've got a question that came in that kind of builds off that. The question is, you primarily sell your product to companies who want to sell to companies in your database. Can you also sell the data to those companies who are in the data set itself? Yes.
Competitive intelligence is a really good one. We just acquired a product earlier or actually late last year in October that has a lot of competitive intelligence data in the trucking space. So who are the top shippers using that fleet? So you can absolutely use it from that perspective. You could also see if there's consolidation in the industry. People want to subscribe to the data to be able to source acquisitions. So that's another really good use case too. Finally, if you have things like, if you ever go to LinkedIn and you look at their company profiles, you can see employment growth at that company going up or down. If you were to layer some of that in with some of the other characteristics you might have at a company, people might be able to see that I should be offering these services because that company seems to be growing faster, or people who offer that service are growing faster than others. So I think it's a great question. You can absolutely sell that. I think Hanley Wood has a few businesses that are data businesses that are similarly aligned to that model.
All right, excellent. Folks, we've got a couple minutes left. If you do have a question, please take the time now. You can submit your question via the Q&A tab in the lower left-hand corner, or go ahead, hit *7 to unmute your line. We don't bite, at least not today. Prescott, you had talked early on about how the data group for Randall Reilly represents 42% of the profit, but just 15% of the workforce. Can you talk a little bit about what type of positions are in your group, and then also how you work with the broader organization? I mean, how do you empower what they're doing, and how does, say, editorial or sales or events, how do they help with what you guys are doing?
Great question. So sales is not part of our group. Historically, we had a kind of dedicated sales team. We are now kind of in a one salesperson handles that account, and they bring in the subject matter experts from the data division or the digital division or the content division as needed. Their whole focus, their comp model, they get the same commission if they sell a data product with an awesome margin or another product with a terrible margin. It is all aligned to the client. So what's here? We have our data production team, So we produce a lot of proprietary data. So we have researchers and analysts who, about 40 of them, who actually produce the data, pull that data in and code it and normalize it and assign it. Not everybody, don't think that is a requirement. Our RigDig product doesn't use any of those data production resources. So there are different ways of going about it, but that is one of the things. Development is here as well. So product development, engineering, all that reports into data, and then client success does as well. So the idea of being able to have people who are experts in using our products and who are market focused. So our client success team basically, we have one person who handles copiers, we have 2 people who handle construction, and 3 people who handle trucking, and 4 people who handle agriculture, that type of thing.
All right, excellent. Prescott, terrific presentation as always. Thank you for doing this. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. We will be sending the recording and the deck for this presentation as a follow-up. Also, I would encourage you to check out the site for our Business Information and Media Summit. We have an archive of presentations from that event that include the original presentation that Prescott did there, as well as several other presentations on data. And I'd also encourage you to check out the Connectiv Executive Summit that's going to be held May 14th to May 16th in Charleston. Again, as I said, data was a big theme of the event last year. It's going to continue to be a big theme this year with some new speakers, some fresh faces, and I think you guys will get a lot out of it. So with that, Prescott, thank you very much. Thanks to our audience today, and that concludes the webinar.
Thanks very much, Matt. Thanks, everyone, for your time.